Hello, Hello, and welcome back to another chapter of It Hurts the Hope by Inquilatory on AO3. Chapter 20, Contentment. It takes a few days, but Grian gets used to being Grian. It's a strange, almost too easy transition, slipping from one name to the next as easily as switching sweaters. It's probably because it used to be your name, Pearl speculates one evening while they sit curled up in his nest with matching cups of warm tea. Your mind subconsciously remembers being called that, so it's easy to get used to it again. Whatever the reason, Grian is relieved. It feels so right to be called Grian, and every time someone calls him G or Gree as a nickname, it makes all his feathers fluff up. He doesn't even mind when he gets teased for it. He's learning to accept all of his funny, broken pieces. He's helped along by Pearl and Mumbo and Scar and all the other hermits, who immediately accept his new name without question or protest. Exuma drops by more often, and he and Pearl spent many hours working with Doc to try and remove the code block on Grian's memories. They haven't made any progress, but, in a way, Grian thinks that he's okay with that. He doesn't remember his past, but from what Pearl tells him, his past is gone, and forgotten anyways. Pearl rarely speaks of Evo, and it's clear that the server was left behind soon after its admin was taken. So really, he thinks that he's fine. He's making new memories every day on Hermitcraft, and it's almost funny how quickly he manages to integrate into the Hermit's big dysfunctional family. He refuses to use his powers. Sometimes the nightmares wake him up, and he goes to Pearl for comfort. In a way, he's still afraid he might lose it all. The fear of the Watchers still haunts his steps whenever it gets too quiet. But now, it's never too quiet. He runs around with Team Zit and learns to ride horses with B-dubs. He spends a peaceful evening with Cleo and Joe, listening to Joe's airy accent as he reads aloud from his favorite books. He goes flying with False and Pearl, spars with Etho, plays music with Mumbo and Scar. Time goes on, and Grian feels better with each passing day. Time goes on, and Grian heals. He's been on the server for almost 2 months when the next meeting is called, and this time he goes to it with his best friends at his side and his sister at his other. Alright, can we get started, please? Exuma calls out, standing in front of his chair. The chaos around the table continues. Wells and False are trying to catch each other in headlocks. Zed and Tango were trying to compose lyrics to Etho's note block music. And Ren is yelling for help while Doc wrestles him out of his chair. No one even reacts to having heard the admin. Stress, sitting to Xuma's left, and knitting a violently pink scarf, has had a laugh. Sorry, love. I don't think they heard ya, she says, then carefully tucks away her scarf in progress and stands up. She barely even comes up to Exuma's shoulders, so she clambers onto her flower-decorated chair to gain some height. I'll only say this once, she says to the room in a general, calmly, and in a tone of voice that doesn't even carry halfway across the room. No one turns to look at her except maybe Scar. He gets distracted by B-dubs trying to spirit a jelly away. Shut up! Stress roars, and the room goes dead silence. Wells looks up from where he's caught False under his arm. Etho's notebook lets out a pitiful plink before turning off. Ren lifts his head up from the floor. Stress climbs off her chair and pats Exuma's armored shoulder before sitting down. "There you go," she says to the silence, and takes her scarf out again. 20 odd hermits watch her in astonishment. Thank you, Stress," Exuma says, and motions with a hand around the table. "Now, I'd like to start, so if you could all be so kind." Chatter starts up again as the hermits untangle from their various fights, but it's much more muted and several nervous glances are shot in Stress's direction. Stress continues knitting her scarf. Green sinks down into his stool next to Pearl's temporary seat and shoots her a grin. Pearl's returning expression is much more baffled and slightly concerned for all of their mental sanity. "So," Exuma claps his hands together, relieved that the room is much quieter and subdued. "Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I do understand that this is a normal meeting, so attendance shouldn't be mandatory, but we've got some matters today that require all of us present." "We're voting, aren't we?" someone calls from the other side of the table, and everyone seems to react rather visibly to that. Green's pretty sure it's Beef who called out, but he's more interested in how several of the hermits shift in their chairs, some shooting glances at Exuma, or, oddly enough, Green. "Ha! Well, yes, I did have that planned," Exuma says, visibly thrown off, "but there are a few things I want to address before that. So if you'll restrain your questions for a moment, I'd be much obliged." The hermits go silent, and Doc motions with one hand for Exuma to continue. They're a chaotic bunch, and it's hard to rein in mischief when they're in close quarters. But if their admin is asking for silence, they listen. "First off, I'm sure many of you have noticed already, but we have a guest with us today." Exuma motions to Pearl, who gives a wave and an awkward smile. "Hermits, this is Pearl. Pearl, my hermits." Pearl is a researcher and a world hopper who agreed to come over and visit to assist with Green's memory lost. As it turns out, she's also Green's sister, something we were unaware of until they met. Several people laugh at that, a strange coincidence, and one that only hermits could cause. Green finds himself giggling as well, struck by the absurdity of the situation. He nudges Pearl's shoulder, and she nudges him back with a smile. Pearl is assisting Doc and I with trying to remove the code block on Green's memories. Progress is slow, but we're confident we'll crack it soon enough. We're not sure how long she'll be staying, but it won't be a permanent arrangement. She's staying with Mumbo and Green for now. Which brings me to the second part. One I'm sure most of you already know. Green, previously Xelqua, has reverted back to his old name. I've changed his player name in the server list to reflect that, and I'm sure you all have already started using his right name. Green immediately snags Green's communicator from his pocket and pulls up the server list. True enough, hovering near the middle with Scar's own name right under it, is Green in all its glory. It feels like a bigger deal than it is. It feels like a huge deal, because Exuma wouldn't bother to change a player's world name for anything short term. Green already knows that he's staying, that in all technicality, he is a hermit, but it still feels new every time it hits him. A while back, I also spoke to Green and extended an invitation to become an official hermit. Green accepted, and admittedly, I've been slacking on finalizing that bit. I was more concentrated on getting him to know his real name and all that. My bad. The hermits chuckle, knowing that Exuma's apology is mostly light-hearted and without any actual self-blame. Exuma laughs along, but it quickly fades out as he rubs a gloved hand along the back of his neck. It's a motion that immediately puts Green on edge, because he can feel the admin's eyes on him, and he doesn't know why. There is one thing I didn't mention, Exuma says, and Green feels like a cold bucket of water has been poured down his shirt. There it is. He knew it. The trick, the trap, the fine print he wasn't informed of. In order for a player to join Hermitcraft, there has to be a vote with all the hermits, and it has to be unanimous. In this case, it's mostly symbolic since we all know the results, but yeah. Green's not so sure, actually. He spent 2 months with these players, sure, but at the end of the day, how well does he really know them? He knows that Mama will vouch for him, and Scar, maybe Doc, and False. But what about the others? He's a watcher. He's an abomination that hacked into their home and threatened their safety. Still does, in fact. Exuma hadn't told him there would be a vote. He's pretty sure the admin was afraid he'd pack his bags and leave. He probably would have. Better than building up false hope that would come crashing down the minute the vote happened and he was gassed out again. But now he can't run. Can't avoid his fate that seems to be approaching much too swiftly. All he can do is sit next to Pearl and Scar and wait for the executioner's axe to come down. All in favor of Green, Watcher Avian Hybrid, becoming a whitelisted player in the Hermit, raise your hand. Green's heart stops, then starts again. In the space between one breath and another, he feels the world around him and the code within his fragile, not quite godlike form. And like a miracle, like a dream, arms rise up around the table. Mumbo's is up first, so fast he nearly smacks his neighbor in the face. Scar is only a second behind. Doc, False, Beat-Ups, Tango, Impulse, Stress. Even the hermits that Green's only talked to once or twice. XB, Beef, Wells, Ren, Joe with his strange wise eyes, and Jevin with his hand all translucent blue and wobbly. The result is obvious, but Green counts them anyways. He tallies up the result and wonders if he's hit his head and is hallucinating. It's unanimous. It's unanimous. Right then, Exuma says as calmly as ever, but Green can clearly hear the relief in his voice. It's an infectious feeling, the feeling of acceptance, and he can tell that all the hermits gathered at the table can feel it too. Ren shoots him a thumbs up. False ruffles her feathers and trills at him. Scar looks like he's going to explode from joy. Pearl squeezes his hand under the table. He squeezes back. Maybe a little too hard, but void, he's ecstatic. He's officially, insanely somewhat, unbelievably a hermit. Green the Hermit. Welcome to Hermitcraft, Green, Exuma says, and hands him a communicator. It's not the one he's spawned in with. That one was lost a long time ago, somewhere between running and fighting and being taken prisoner. But this one is better. Key to the world and to his person. More expanded now that he has all the perks of being a whitelisted player. It's a stupid piece of metal and cold. But to Green, it's the key to a new life. Prove that he's made it, that he escaped the Watchers and found himself again. Thank you, he says, and despite his best efforts, it comes out somewhat strangled. Thank you. He picks up the comm and hugs it to his chest, trying desperately to signal with his eyes that he's ready to move on to the next thing before anyone notices that he's trying not to cry. Exuma thankfully seems to pick up on his desperation and moves on to other matters. It has been brought to my attention that some hermits have off-world shopping to get done, so we're organizing a trip in a few days. If you're interested in coming along, send me a message and I'll add you to the list. As always, please only come if it's imperative. We're banned from most public servers in groups of 12 or more. You are? Pearl blurts, and Grian has to admit that the sea of grins sent her way is anything but reassuring. So the team will be made up of 11. Exuma continues, opening up a panel and a line of text flickering across the scene. I'm coming, obviously, and Joe and Cleo have specifically requested to be a part. Other than that, there's 8 slots left, so if you want to come, it's a first come, first served. He lets that hang in the air for a moment, and a few hermits reach for their comms, obviously wondering how fast they can type out a message and send it. I'm kidding, Exuma adds, and everyone bursts out laughing. If you can give your shopping list to another hermit instead of coming, then that'll shrink our group considerably. If you can't, and we have too many, we'll figure it out, no worries. As for other group matters, MCC is coming up soon. If you're interested in participating, say it now so I can get a list started. Several hermits raise their hands excitedly, False, Scar, and Rend included, and Grian takes the opportunity to lean over towards Pearl. What's MCC? He whispers, and Pearl leans in as well so they can converse without disturbing the plans happening around the table. A multi-server event that happens every month or so, Pearl whispers back. Team-based competition, super popular. My friend Scott is in charge of it. I haven't been to too many, but they're really fun. Grian nods along and thanks her quietly as the hermits finalize their list of participants and settle down again. Exuma swiping away from the panel and closing it down. And, as always, everyone is welcome to tag along and watch from the audience, Exuma says, and Grian swears that the admin looks at him when he says that. There is no pressure to stay home and watch the highlight reel sent out by the mod team. We know, X. It's the same every month. Ren groans from halfway down the table, dramatically slumping in his chair. Doc leans over and not so gently smacks him upside the head, then hitches a thumb in Grian and Pearl's direction. We've got newbies this time, moron, he says, and Ren crosses his arms and looks slightly chastened. I knew that, he mutters, and Exuma wisely decides to move the meeting along to the next topic. It takes a while longer, and Grian admittedly zones out for most of it, but the meeting finally wraps up. Exuma does his usual spiel of last chance to say something, and then unceremoniously tosses them all out the door. It's only when they're outside and the hermits start taking off that Tango and Zed start laughing like maniacs, and everyone collectively gives them a concerned look. Then checks their immediate surroundings for threats. What did you do? False deadpans, already taking a step back towards the meeting room to save Exuma. Tango wheezes out a nettle cackle and does his best to straighten up. Oh, nothing much. He squeezes out between gremlin-like noises of glee. Just, maybe, trapped the door and activated as we were leaving. X, don't move! Stress yells, immediately diving for the door. The sound of pistons on the other side informs the gathered group that it's all too late, and they wait in horrified silence until the communicators buzz in unison. Exumavoid was slain by pufferfish. Vintage beef. What in the world? Exumavoid. Someone violated neutral grounds, and when I find out who, they're dead meat. Quill's Knight. Oh no. False looks up from her communicator and locks eyes with Zed and Tango, who were starting to look like they maybe regret their master plan. Better start running, False suggests, and the two pranksters are quick to pull out elytras and disappear into the clouds. Well, Green, Joe says, sticking his hands in his pockets and tilting his head back to look at the sky. Welcome to Hermitcraft. Green laughs so hard he has to sit down for a long moment and catch his breath. Tears pricking at his eyes from sheer joy and bafflement. Pearl sits down next to him and leans back on her hands, humming thoughtfully. I'm impressed, G, she muses, as they watch the newly respawned Exuma come into view and gratefully accept his gear back from False and Stress. You've somehow found a server that is more insane than Nevo was. I have, Green agrees, and leans against her shoulder as Exuma bends down to give Stress a quick hug. They're all bonkers, every one of them. But you're happy here? Green watches as Stress places a flower crown on Exuma's helmet, and False has to grab onto Joe to support her as she laughs. Yes, he says, and it's the truest thing he said. I am. And that's the end of chapter 20.